Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Matt Abrahams. He is a leading expert in communication and has done so for decades. He's an educator, an author, a podcast host, and a coach. He lectures on organizational behavior at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. And as I said, he is also the author of Think Faster, Talk Smarter, How to Speak Successfully When You're Put on the Spot. In part 1 of the show, we talked about some of the common mistakes and how we can get in our own way. And Matt sort of outlined how we can actually become way better at communication and some of the tragic flaws that we tend to have. And in part 2 here, we want to get a little more into the methodology of what it takes to be able to think faster, talk smarter, and be able to be successful when we're put on the spot, because that is what life is. It's a form of communication. We're always in communication, and the quality of our relationships, as we were talking about in part 1, is really vastly dependent upon the quality of our communication. How good is your relationship going to be with anyone if you can't successfully communicate? And by the way, communication is 2 ways. It's what is heard and what is delivered. So, Matt, to jump back in, can we dive through or go through step by step a little bit more into the methodology? I realize you have to repeat some of the things you said earlier, but let's get a little sort of more so people can write that checklist.
Thank you. The methodology really has 2 components. It's about the mindset you have and the messages you create. M&M, my favorite candies. And this methodology was developed several years ago based on a request the deans of the Stanford Business School came to me with. They said, we have a problem here. Our incredibly bright students are really struggling answering professors' cold calls. You remember that, where the professor looks at you and says, what do you think? And you have to respond. And they knew the answer. The students knew the answer. They were struggling. So I took it upon myself to do a deep dive research into psychology, anthropology, sociology, neurology, improvisation, and as a result, crafted the methodology. The first 4 mindset steps start with managing anxiety. Many of us get nervous in communication, period, but especially when put on the spot. So we have to learn to manage that. There are ways we can manage both symptoms and sources to feel more confident. From there, we have to reframe how we see these spontaneous speaking situations, not as threats, but as opportunities. When most of us learn we have to give a presentation, that makes us really uncomfortable. But when we hear we have to take questions afterwards, we really see this as threatening and challenging. And we can flip that and see it as an opportunity. From there, we have to remind ourselves there is no right way to communicate. There are better and worse ways. And this is where we maximize that mediocrity. We focus on just getting it done, which frees up a whole bunch of cognitive resources to help us do it well. Fourth, we have to listen well. People often get curious about, why do we have to listen if it's all about speaking? Well, when you listen well, you understand what's really needed. And we often respond in a heuristic way in spontaneous speaking situations, which can get in the way of us actually connecting and doing what's needed. I'll give you a quick example. I had a colleague once, we came out of a meeting and looked at me and said, hey, Matt, how'd that go? I heard feedback. So I started itemizing all the things that went wrong, the things we could do better. What he really wanted in that moment, though, was support. And had I noticed, he came out the back door, he spoke more quietly, he was looking away when he asked for feedback, I would have seen that what I did was actually exactly the wrong thing to do. So we have to listen not just to the words, but how, where, and when they're said. Those are the mindset pieces. It's anxiety, it's seeing it as an opportunity, focusing on connection, not perfection, and listening. Once we've got the right approach, we then actually have to craft the message. And I am a huge fan of structure. Structure is just a logical connection of ideas. It's not listing. A very common structure most people know because they've watched television advertisements is problem, solution, benefit. That's a structure. The advertisement starts with an issue, challenge in the world. They then talk about how the product or service remedies it. And then they talk about how you benefit. That's a structure, a logical connection. If I can put my content into a structure, it's like a recipe. I'm a lousy cook, but I'm much better when I follow a recipe. And then finally, we have to be concise. And we do that by making sure our message is relevant and has a specific goal we're trying to achieve. Know, feel, do. And that know, feel, do, and relevance help us focus the structure that we create. So taken together, those 6 steps help you be more effective. Now, people might be intimidated and say, that's a lot of steps. I get through these steps in less than an hour when I teach a workshop to the MBA students, which I've been doing now for many years, and we've seen great success with it. You just have to take little steps incrementally, and you become a better spontaneous speaker.
I love the methodology.
Thank you.
Simple, profound. So let's go back to where we just were. Can I put you on the spot?
Absolutely. I would enjoy it.
Beautiful. So I would like for you to deliver a 90-second Instagram-style message using your methodology so that we can really understand. You can set it up first and tell us what you're going to do if you like.
Well, let me put you on the spot a little bit. Give me a topic, a product, or an idea you'd like me to pitch.
Okay. The topic is the need for self-awareness.
Excellent. Okay.
That's what we were talking about earlier on.
Absolutely. What if you could truly connect in a deep and meaningful way so that you can feel both emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually connected to someone, so that you can go through life knowing that you have people who support you and who you can support? The way to do this is through first becoming aware of yourself, reflection, introspection. For example, imagine you're moving to a new city, or you're starting school for the first time, or a new job. The need to connect is really important. But in order to do that, you first have to better understand who you are and the value you bring. And that's not all. By simple introspection and reflection, becoming self-aware, you actually can grow yourself. It's not just about connecting to others. It's about learning about areas that can improve your life through your own work. So there you go. So I have a structure that I really like for pitching ideas. Elevator pitch, real quick pitches. It's 4 sentence starters. What if you could, so that, for example, and that's not all. And you can change those words. What they're doing is, what if you could gets people's attention. It connects. Attention is the most precious commodity we have in the world today. I got to get your attention. When I say, what if you could, you start to envision. So that makes it relevant. So this is why it's important to you. For example, grounds it in reality. It allows us to connect to the idea. And then finally, the and that's not all says that this idea, whatever it is I'm talking about, this product, whatever I'm talking about, has legs beyond this specific circumstance or situation. So all I did when you said self-awareness, I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to pitch it in this structure, which halved my burden, because whenever you speak spontaneously, I have to think about what to say and how to say it. I now know how I'm going to say it. So all I had to do is think about, what does self-awareness afford me? Self-awareness affords me deeper connection and insight into how I can grow in my life. And with that, I had my ingredients, I had my recipe. All I had to do was start talking. And you tell me if I did a good job at it or not.
You did indeed. Thank you. I really appreciate you breaking that down and delivering it, and then breaking down what you deliver in a way that allows people to comprehend it in a succinct manner, which is beautiful.
Thank you.
You said you grew up with a mom who was a teacher and a dad who was a lawyer. Do you feel like you were always a good communicator?
I don't know that I consider myself a good communicator now. I see so many ways I can improve. I will say that there was a focus on communication in my house. It was something we talked about. My mother would constantly be asking, how can I better get the kids she was teaching to learn this skill? And my father was constantly thinking about, how do I make this argument, this logic clearer? And when they would give me feedback, when I would ask them to read my papers, it was that way. So I think it was always something we talked about, and I saw it as a path that you can be on to continue to improve. The way I envision it is, it's climbing a mountain. We're all trying to ascend to the peak of really great communication, and all of us are at different steps along the way, but we can all move up the mountain. Some people don't quite know where the mountain is, and some people are right almost near the summit, but we can all continue to improve.
Yeah, I think that the moment you think you don't need to improve, you're in big trouble.
Exactly.
You said it was always a focus, and obviously you lived in that environment, which is pretty amazing. Was there a communication trauma at any point? I mean, aside from splitting your pants, which
yeah, I would say that was pretty traumatic. Most people don't have that experience. I want to share 2 situations that happened very early in my life. I was like 7 or 8, one with my mother, one with my father, that I really think helped me shape communication. I'll tell the stories quickly. My dad used to always read the newspaper, and this is back in the day, you remember, where people actually read newspapers. They held paper in their hands. And my father was laughing from behind the newspaper, and I said, Dad, what's so funny? And he called me over, and he was reading a comic strip. And the comic strip was a picture of a father with his arm around his son, looking at the store that the father clearly owned. Across the store that the father owned, it said, "Going out of business." And the caption was, "Someday, son, this will all be yours." And I didn't get it. I'm like, it's going out of business. There won't be anything. My father said, no, that was the gimmick. That's how they were trying to get people in to buy their stuff, that they pretended they were going out of business. As a 7-year-old, I'm like, whoa, we can use language in a way to motivate or manipulate. So that was interesting. And then a year later or so, my mother got frustrated with my brother and me and said, "You guys have too much stuff. We're going to do a garage sale." And I grew up in a town where there were lots of garage sales. So my mother said, "We need to make sure our garage sale stands out so people come to us." So she instructed my brother and me to spell garage wrong. If you insert a B in the word garage, you get garbage. So we had a garbage sale while everybody else had a garage sale, and we sold more stuff in our neighborhood than anybody else that weekend. And to this day, my mother thinks that it's because we misspelled the sign. I think people might have thought we were stupid and they get better deals. But my point is, again, I learned that through communication, in this case, words again, you could have an impact. I wouldn't say those were traumatic, but they were fundamentally inspiring to me to really think about how language and communication impacts people.
But you bring up something that's a very interesting subject, which is the subject of persuasion.
Yes.
Communication certainly can be passive, but mostly we're looking to, in some way, shape or form, persuade. And I think that persuasion often gets a bad vibe. But if you're trying to get your kids to go to sleep at night, that's persuasion. If you're trying to get your kids to eat their veggies, that's persuasion. If you're trying to get the best out of your people as a leader, that's persuasion. How do you see persuasion in the context of communication and communication skills?
So I actually think persuasion is fundamental to communication. Much of our communication is to influence people in some way, shape, or form. Even if we're just trying to educate and inform, there's some persuasion in that. So I believe it's fundamental. Now, persuasion has some ethical issues about it, right? Where persuasion ends and manipulation begins, that's a tricky thing to define. But I do think it's really important for all of us to understand and appreciate the different techniques and tactics that can be used to influence and motivate us. And I have been fascinated by this. I've studied it. And it's something that I think we all have to be aware of, if nothing else, to be more intelligent consumers, not just of products, but of ideas and people. So it is important. And there are things we can do to increase the likelihood that our messages will be more influential. And there's some things we can do to help ourselves build up resistance to other people who are trying to influence us.
Do you think there is a specific set of skills for persuasion?
I do. I think there are tactics and techniques that people can deploy. I think it's very clear. Some people are better at it than others. Some of them, I think, are more insidious and subtle, and we need to be worried about or cautious of. And others are pretty simple and direct and intuitive. And so thinking through those as a communicator is important. These are tools in your toolkit. I hope everyone is guided by a sense of ethics and a moral compass to not try to manipulate. But similarly, we need to be aware of these so that we can avoid being manipulated by others.
The reason I bring this up is because I think in many ways, communication is so much of our lives is impacted by trauma. Trauma has an impact on how we communicate. And what I say there, oftentimes, if somebody's communicated with us in a certain way, it's traumatized us. And that traumatizes the way that we communicate with others. If we were scammed, we're very cautious of not scamming another person, for instance. Talk to us about how you see trauma impacts communication or can impact communication.
Well, I think you're certainly right. We are the result of our life experiences, the traumas we experience, the traumas and challenges those around us experience. And of course, that influences who we are and how we communicate and how open we are and what works for us and what doesn't. But again, as we've talked about a couple times earlier, it's really about understanding that and that self-reflection and really understanding who we are and what we bring to the relationships we have and the communications that we deliver. But fundamentally, who we are is the result of the experiences we've had or the things that we haven't had access to. So yes, it strongly influences us. Where we make a mistake, I think, is where we assume one of two things. Either that everybody can understand our experience, which is not always the case, and we have to go out of our way to help connect people to our experience, or that because of our experience, we can never achieve what it is we want to achieve because of that experience. And I think both of those are not accurate, and we have to work to remedy both of those, what I think are challenging thoughts that get in the way of success.
If I may, I'd propose a third option, which is that we generalize that trauma on others. So we might project that onto other people. And people, especially today in this world where everybody's being canceled for everything, is that if I say this, they will be offended. And I think that communication today in many ways is more difficult than ever because we've lost this sense of nuance. We've lost this sense of context that you and I were brought up with, where I hung out with my mates when I was a kid and they said something to me that if we took that freeze frame and moved it to today, this kid would be seen as a bully, or I would be seen as a bully, when in fact it was playful banter between two kids. Today, that's terrifying because I could get canceled, or somebody will think that I'm a whatever it is, chauvinist, a racist, or some ist of some kind because of this communication. Do you feel like communication has gotten more difficult, or do you feel like it's the same or easier?
Yes to all of that. So let me take each piece of that. So I think communication has gotten more difficult. Clearly, there are sensitivities that existed that we didn't have. I think in some cases, these are quite justified. In other cases, I think it can be problematic. Second, we have technology and tools that are in some ways making communication easier, but also bringing about disconnection and making emotional well-being a little harder. So I see benefits and challenges all around. But if you think about it, communication has always faced challenges and opportunities as society develops and grows, as technology becomes more available, as what is important viewed at the macro level changes. So this is nothing new. It might feel a little more intense because the leaps in technology and the equity or more equity that is being strived for and hopefully achieved is changing some of the dynamics. And this is all happening at the same time. But I think this is a continuation of the evolution of change that we always see with communication. It certainly feels intense now, but also take just the microcosm of work. You could be in a workplace that has 4 to 5 generations of people working side by side. This is the first time probably ever in humankind that we've had that, because people are living longer, people are healthier, people are actively interested in working longer. So things are changing and we're facing situations that we haven't before, but it's really an evolution of what's come before us.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I want to come back, if I may, to something you talked about in part 1 of the show. You talked about that 14-year-old coming on stage, talking about martial arts, doing the kick, etc. You talked about your mum and your dad, your mum being a teacher, your dad being a lawyer, and that impacting your communication. Do you think that martial arts impacted the way that you learned to communicate?
100%. I started training in the martial arts almost exactly around the time I ripped my pants. It was just a little bit before that. And I continue to study to this day. Yes, martial arts teaches you so much and has been so helpful for me in terms of just relating to people in the world, but especially in communication. When people think of martial arts, they think about what they see in the MMA and the fighting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a deeper connective spiritual element to the martial arts that isn't necessarily portrayed in what you see in TV or in action movies. It's really about listening. There's an intimacy that happens in combative sports that's not romantic or sexual. If you define intimacy as connection, there's a lot of connection. There's feedback that is immediate. If I do something wrong, I feel it, literally at the hands of somebody else or my own body. So yes, I've learned a tremendous amount of how to communicate better, how to listen better, how to relate to others better. Often in my life, when I'm having some issue or challenge outside of the martial arts studio, bringing it into the studio helps me resolve it. And similarly, when I'm having some issues in the martial arts studio around certain moves or combinations, thinking about how those might apply in the outside world, not in a physical way, but just what is the struggle here can help. So for me, it's been a great opportunity to reflect and grow.
I found martial arts and Western boxing to be great helpers for me in my communication because, as you said, if you close your eyes, you get punched in the head. That's the basic law of boxing. And the most natural thing to do when a fist is coming towards your face is close your eyes. So
Right.
how do you keep your eyes open when the fist is coming towards you is in many ways like standing on a stage and somebody asking you a question you did not expect. And if you close your eyes, close your ears, close off your senses, you're going to get knocked on your ass at a communication level rather than keeping your eyes, ears, and attention open and paying attention to what's actually coming at you. I couldn't agree more that it's a profound skill. I really want my youngest grandchildren to take up martial arts of some kind in their early years. Whether they keep with it or not, I just think there's so much self-awareness, body awareness that is so valuable in that at a communication level.
Amen to that. And the other thing I will add is getting hit, getting punched, and learning that you can survive through that is an incredibly empowering lesson. Everybody's afraid of getting hit, but once you get hit and realize, hey, I can function through that. And the corollary to that, when you're talking about Q&A or feedback or being put on the spot, is very profound. Knowing that you can handle it, maybe not with aplomb, but you can handle it, can really make a big difference.
I just did a presentation this week in Toronto for an international organization, and I talked there about don't be dumb resilient. And I said, resilience is old school and it's dumb. And how do I know? Because I was the king of dumb resilience. And so let me explain resilience to you. And I said, resilience is very simple. Get knocked down 8 times, get up 9. And I said, as somebody who boxed and somebody who fell off mountains, not once, but 4 times, I can tell you I was the king of dumb resilience. What you need to be is anti-fragile, because in martial arts and in boxing, you learn to be anti-fragile, which means you get knocked down, you stay down long enough to work out, why am I on my ass?
Right.
And then you get up. If
Yes.
you're resilient, you get knocked down and you just spring back up. And that's not smart. And so in many ways, even in my speaking training, we teach people that if you get knocked down, stay down long enough to work out why you're down so that you can come back smarter, stronger. And that's beyond resilience. That's the anti-fragility that we all need. So when it comes to what you've been speaking about and clearly what the book is about, what is if you were sort of summarizing how to speak clearly when put on the spot, what's your sort of 1, 2, 3, knock it on the head tips that you would have somebody really grasp, even as they walk away from listening to this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it starts with, this is a skill that you can develop. Number one, many people are intimidated by it. Step by step, 1 foot in front of the other, you can develop this skill. 2, it's all about being in service of your audience and seeing these things as opportunities, not threats. That changes your entire approach and relaxes you so you're not as anxious. And leverage structure. If you have a structure that you can rely on, it will help you. It gives you the roadmap to get you through these circumstances. You can't get lost if you have a map. You won't feel nervous if you have a map. So know you can do it. Think about your audience, see these things as opportunities, leverage a structure, and you will be a much more effective, in the moment communicator.
May I add one and see what you think of it?
Sure.
And that is, be willing to say, I don't know.
Absolutely. So when you get confronted with a question you don't know the answer to, when you're in a circumstance where you're not comfortable, saying I don't know can be very empowering. I would argue that you need to follow it up with, but I'd like to learn, or I'm going to go find out for you, depending on the circumstance. Saying it is important, but then what's the next step is important.
I fully agree. I think that oftentimes as communicators, we get in trouble by thinking we should always have the answer. It's the leader who always thinks they should have the answer, who comes off as arrogant, rather than the leader who says, you know what, I haven't thought about that. I don't know the answer, but I certainly would like to find out. I'm going to go do my research. Or do you know something that I might learn from? That openness, that vulnerability makes you a far better communicator and makes you far more approachable than the guy who always has the answers.
That's absolutely right. 100%. When you're making up the answers or you're hiding so you don't have to be in that circumstance, gets you in trouble.
I think that is probably the biggest disaster you can make, is not making it up, but pretending you know the answer when you don't. And people just really appreciate the authenticity and the vulnerability of saying, you know what, I don't know. That's cool. Thank you. I know that people are often surprised when I say, oh, I never thought about that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Really? I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? I love learning. Because like you just said, if you're a great teacher, you are naturally deeply curious. And that's why I sign off with everything. Stay curious, my friends. Because if you're not curious, you're not learning, and you can't teach if you're stopped learning.
Absolutely, 100% support that. Curiosity is the fuel for learning and for teaching.
So, Matt, as we come towards the end of part 2 of the show, and I thank you for all your generosity and your wisdom here, I want to know if there's a sort of final note you want to deliver to people, and then I want to ask you one final question.
My final note is this. Take the time to build and work on your communication skills, planned or spontaneous. Communication is critical to success in our personal and professional lives. It is how we relate to others. It is how we lead. Taking the time to develop communication skills and knowing that all of us can develop our communication skills is critical.
Thank you. So here's my final question to you. If you were to be able to travel back in time, what would that 14-year-old who split his pants on stage think about meeting this Matt, the Matt we are today?
I think he would say, you only have a 6th degree black belt. You should be much higher than that. Because after all the years, I think I would think that. But no, in reality, I think the teen-year-old would be very pleased that I found a way to do something that I was passionate about. Because even at 14, I was beginning to wonder, what is it that I want to be in the world? And where can I add value? What can I learn? How can I help? And I think the 14-year-old would be very pleased to know that I found a passion and that I'm still learning and developing.
And I think he might be embarrassed and kind of joyous that you're still telling the story of him splitting his pants.
Yeah, to prove that there was some value in it and to recognize that I ended up with a different woman than the girl I was interested in there, but life is good.
That's wonderful. Matt, please tell people where they can find out more about you and all your wonderful resources.
Well, Dov, first let me thank you for not only this conversation, but the good work you do. You have actually been very helpful to me in my life. We had some very meaningful conversations to me that you did not need to have, and I appreciate that you did that. And learn more about me, mattabrahams.com. Listen to the podcast, fastersmarter.io is where you can find all about the podcast, Think Fast, Talk Smart.
Excellent. And as I said, we will certainly make sure that we post all of those links in the show notes. So if you didn't catch them, don't worry. And remember, if you just ended up on part 2, go back to part 1. There's lots of great stuff in there for you as well. When it comes to communication, remember that those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. What meaning you give will determine how people are moving through their lives. Leaders committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that they must tap into what drives human behavior, and that is the emotional source code of the individual and of the organization. I'm Dov Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness the emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified actualized meaning is the single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and for companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever it is you tune into the show from and do us a favor. It really counts, and we're really grateful when you do it. Please rate, review, and of course, a big thank you to you for sharing the show with everybody you know. If you are a regular listener, we sincerely appreciate it. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about the quality of your communication. It always matters. No matter how good you think you are, you can always be better. Your communication is never about you, but about what you deliver. Remember, you are responsible for the communication you give and is received. If it's not received well, that's your responsibility too. I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.